December 22nd, 1944, 1447. Inside his command post at La Gleize, SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich stood over a map and allowed himself a smile. His 6th SS Panzer Army had pushed 60 kilometers into the American lines. Reports spread across the table spoke of confusion and fear, entire enemy divisions falling back in disarray. The Americans are no real soldiers, Dietrich remarked to his chief of staff. They are businessmen pretending to fight. When the battle becomes serious, they flee. 800 kilometers to the south, in the town of Nancy, General George S. Patton examined that same map. His expression was not one of satisfaction, but of icy determination. His Third Army was preparing for what would soon be remembered as one of the most extraordinary maneuvers of modern warfare. In 48 hours, Patton told the commanders, we will turn the whole army 90 degrees and strike the Germans in a way they will never forget. For days later, Dietrich's smile had vanished. His SS formations, once thought unstoppable, were surrounded, and the American troops he had dismissed were reshaping the rules of mobile warfare. What began as ridicule had turned into disaster. Hitler's boldest gamble was becoming Patton's greatest success. The story began on December 16, 1944, at 5:30 in the morning. The stillness of the Ardennes forest was broken by the roar of artillery. Operation Wacht am Rhein, Hitler's final attempt to alter the course of the war, was underway. 200,000 German soldiers, supported by 600 tanks and nearly 1,900 guns, surged forward along an 80-kilometer front defended by only 4 American divisions. It was the largest German offensive in the West since 1940. For this last blow, Hitler chose the same region where, for years earlier, German forces had smashed through to the Channel and defeated France. The Ardennes, with its thick forests, rough terrain, and narrow roads, appeared ideal for surprise. American commanders viewed the sector as quiet and assigned their least experienced units to it. The 106th Infantry Division had been on the line for just 2 weeks. The 28th Infantry Division was still worn down after heavy losses in the Hürtgen Forest. The opening phase favored the Germans. American units, taken by surprise, pulled back in disorder. Entire battalions surrendered. On the first day alone, German forces advanced 20 kilometers. In Berlin, optimism surged. Goebbels began preparing a proclamation announcing a second Dunkirk. Wehrmacht generals, retreating for months, dared to believe again in victory. At Allied headquarters in Versailles, the reaction was the opposite. General Dwight D. Eisenhower immediately understood that Germany had committed everything it still possessed. This was not a diversion, but a strategic risk, one that might extend the war by a year or end it outright. Eisenhower made the most daring choice of his career. He called Patton. The plan for Operation Wacht am Rhein had taken shape in the fall of 1944. Under pressure from the Red Army in the east and the Allied advance in the west, Hitler searched desperately for a dramatic solution. On September 16, 1944, he summoned Colonel General Alfred Jodl and revealed a proposal that stunned even his own staff. German armies would break through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River, seize Antwerp, and split the Allied forces. If we capture Antwerp, Hitler said, tracing the route on the map, the British and Americans will be separated. They will be forced into a separate peace, and then we can turn all our strength against the Bolsheviks. On paper, the operation was ambitious. 3 armies, the 5th Panzer Army, the 6th SS Panzer Army, and the 7th Army, were expected to cover 150 kilometers to Antwerp in 4 days. To achieve this, Hitler gathered Germany's last strategic reserves, 12 panzer divisions, including the elite SS formations. Yet serious flaws were obvious. Fuel shortages were critical. Each panzer division carried supplies for only 150 kilometers. The Luftwaffe could deploy no more than 800 aircraft against nearly 4,000 Allied planes. Most importantly, the Americans were no longer the inexperienced troops defeated at Kasserine Pass in 1943. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commander in the West, described the operation as unrealistic. Field Marshal Walter Model, assigned to lead the attack, requested a reduced plan. Hitler rejected all objections. "This is our final opportunity," he declared. "If we do not defeat the Allies now, the war is lost." Preparations were conducted under absolute secrecy. The codename Wacht on Rhein was chosen to suggest a defensive posture. Troops moved only at night. Radio transmissions were forbidden. Officers were bound by strict oaths of silence, enforced by the threat of execution. By December 15th, German forces had assembled 200,000 men, 600 tanks and assault guns, and 1,900 artillery pieces in the Ardennes, the largest concentration since Normandy. Opposing them were only 83,000 American soldiers in 4 divisions. The U.S. command continued to believe the Ardennes unsuitable for large-scale operations. General Troy H. Middleton's 8th Corps defended the area with inexperienced and exhausted units. A German officer later recalled the atmosphere in the American lines before the attack. The soldiers played cards, listened to jazz broadcasts, and talked about Christmas at home. They had no sense of what was about to begin. At 5:30 on December 16th, 1944, German artillery unleashed the heaviest barrage on the Western Front since D-Day. Along an 80-kilometer front, 1,900 German guns opened fire at the same moment, saturating American positions. Private James McNamara of the 99th Infantry Division later recalled, "I'd been in the infantry for 2 years, but I had never experienced anything like that. The ground shook beneath us. Trees snapped and fell like twigs. It felt as if the world itself was ending." The bombardment, however, lasted only 90 minutes. German artillery stocks were limited, and ammunition could not be wasted. There were no reserves to sustain a longer barrage. At 7 o'clock, the infantry attack began, advancing behind armored support. The initial blows struck the 14th Cavalry Group and the 106th Infantry Division, among the least experienced units in General Troy Middleton's 8th Corps. The 106th Division had arrived at the front on December 11th and had not yet completed its defensive preparations. The German advance followed the classic blitzkrieg formula. Armored units forced their way through weak points in the American line, while infantry reduced isolated strongholds left behind. The most powerful attacks came from the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandard on the northern flank and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend in the center. By midday, the American situation had become desperate. 2 regimental combat teams of the 106th Division, the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments, were surrounded near the village of Schomberg. It was the largest American encirclement since Patton. Colonel George Deschenaux, commanding the 422nd, attempted a breakout, but German tanks already controlled all escape routes. At 16:30, an order arrived from division headquarters. Hold positions at all costs. Relief was coming. No relief ever arrived. General Allen Jones, commander of the 106th Division, had lost contact with nearly half of his units. His headquarters at St. Vith descended into confusion. Telephones rang without pause. Messengers arrived with contradictory reports. The situation map filled with red markings, each representing a unit cut off or destroyed. At the same time, German armored columns continued to drive forward. The battle group led by SS Obersturmenführer Joachim Paper of the 1st SS Panzer Division advanced 25 kilometers and captured the village of Bullingen. Nearby, close to Malmedy, the first major atrocity of the battle occurred. An American column of medics and support troops encountered Paper's tanks. 84 soldiers surrendered. They were later executed by SS troops in a nearby field. The incident, remembered as the Malmedy Massacre, became one of the darkest symbols of the fighting in the Ardennes. By nightfall, German forces had penetrated up to 20 kilometers along much of the front. Chaos spread through American headquarters. General Courtney Hodges, commander of the 1st Army, lost operational control of the situation for the first time in the war. December 17 proved to be the bleakest day yet for American forces in the Ardennes. The German advance expanded steadily, spreading like an oil stain across the map. By noon, it was unmistakable that this was not a limited operation, but a full-scale offensive. At St. Vith, a critical transportation hub, American defenses were beginning to fail. Major General Robert Hasbrouck, commanding the 7th Armored Division, was ordered to move immediately to assist the encircled units. His division, however, was dispersed across a 30-kilometer front. "I need at least 12 hours to concentrate my forces," Hasbrouck reported by radio. "But I fear that in 12 hours, there will be no one left to rescue." That assessment proved accurate. The situation of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments deteriorated rapidly. Isolated in the forest near Schönberg, American soldiers were cold, hungry, and short of ammunition. German artillery and mortars tightened the encirclement step by step. Private Elmer Clark of the 423rd wrote in his diary, "Third day surrounded. No food, no ammo. Wounded cannot be evacuated. Germans call on us to surrender, promise fair treatment. The men are starting to break." On December 19th, resistance finally collapsed. 7,000 American soldiers laid down their arms, the largest surrender of U.S. forces in the European theater. German propaganda quickly exploited the event to raise morale. Yet, not all American units yielded. In the town of Bastogne, a vital road junction, the 101st Airborne Division prepared for siege. Veterans of Normandy and Operation Market Garden, the paratroopers had no intention of surrendering. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting division commander, received a German ultimatum demanding capitulation to avoid further bloodshed. His response became legendary: "Nuts." German armored columns continued their push. Paper's battle group reached Stavelot, just 10 kilometers from the massive American fuel depot at Spa. Had the SS captured it, they would have possessed enough fuel to reach the Meuse River. Instead, they encountered determined resistance. Lieutenant Colonel David Bergrin's engineer company had prepared demolitions on every bridge along Paper's route. As German tanks approached Stavelot, the Americans destroyed the bridge over the Amblève River. Paper was trapped. Ahead lay a demolished crossing and American anti-tank guns. Behind him, U.S. units were already launching counterattacks. Fuel and ammunition were running dangerously low. "We are in a situation where every hour may be our last," Paper wrote in his war diary. "The Americans are proving far tougher than we expected." By the end of the day, it was evident that the German advance was slowing. Isolated American strongpoints, destroyed bridges, and critical fuel shortages were draining the momentum of the offensive. On December 19, 1944, at 10:30 a.m., the telephone rang at 3rd Army headquarters in Nancy. General George S. Patton answered. On the line was the Supreme Allied Commander. "George," came the voice, "the situation in the Ardennes is critical. I need your army." Eisenhower explained the situation briefly. The Germans had driven 60 kilometers into Allied territory. 2 American divisions had been shattered. Bastogne was surrounded. "How long will it take you to turn your army north?" he asked. 48 hours, Patton answered immediately. "Give me 48 hours and I'll attack." Eisenhower hesitated. What Patton was proposing bordered on impossible. The 3rd Army was deployed eastward, preparing to cross the Saar River. Now it would have to swing 90 degrees and move 150 kilometers north, in the heart of winter, over frozen and congested roads. Any other commander would have asked for a week. Patton asked for 2 days. "All right," Eisenhower finally said. "Do it." Patton replaced the receiver and turned to his staff. His chief of staff, Major General Hugh Gaffey, studied the map and shook his head. "Boss, this can't be done. We have 133,000 men, 800 tanks, 500 guns. How do you move all that in 48 hours? Patton smiled. "You're about to see what a real army can do." For the next 2 hours, Third Army headquarters erupted into controlled chaos. Operations officers plotted routes for hundreds of marching columns. Signal units organized radio networks. Logistics officers calculated fuel consumption and ammunition requirements. At 1300 hours, Patton summoned his division commanders. "Gentlemen," he said, "this will be the hardest operation of the war. We are turning the entire army north and attacking in 48 hours. Who believes this can't be done?" No one raised a hand. The officers of the Third Army knew their commander well. When Patton gave his word, he delivered. "Good," Patton continued. 4th Armored Division moves toward Ardennes. 26th Infantry goes to Luxembourg. 80th Infantry to the Mersch area. The march begins today at 1800 hours. Any questions? Major General Hugh Gaffey, commanding the 4th Armored Division, spoke up. "Sir, what about supplies? We'll be operating away from our bases." "Supplies will follow," Patton replied without hesitation. "The French are opening their depots to us, and Army aviation will deliver ammunition by air." At 1800 hours, the Third Army began what would become the fastest redeployment of a large force in modern warfare. Across the frozen roads of France and Luxembourg, hundreds of columns, tanks, artillery, trucks, and infantry moved north. 133,000 soldiers marched toward battle. The night of December 20th was brutal. Temperatures fell to -15 degrees Celsius. Roads turned into sheets of ice. Long convoys advanced in darkness, guided only by blackout headlights. Sergeant Mike O'Connor, the 4th Armored Division, later wrote to his wife, "We marched all night on frozen roads. Tanks skidded, trucks slid into ditches, but nobody stopped." Patton said 48 hours, so 48 hours it will be. The logistical challenge was immense. The Third Army operated nearly 15,000 vehicles, from tanks to field kitchens. Every one of them had to cover 150 kilometers without sacrificing combat readiness. Colonel Walter Muller, head of movement control, devised a precise system. Roads were divided into corridors. Armored units used main highways. Infantry marched along secondary roads. Artillery and support units took the back routes. Every column had a timetable. Tanks moved at 25 kilometers per hour on paved roads, 15 on dirt. Trucked infantry averaged 30. Towed artillery advanced at 20. Halts were permitted only for refueling and repairs. French gendarmes directed traffic at intersections. American military police controlled the main routes. Engineer battalions cleared snow and spread sand on the worst icy stretches. Yet concealment remained the greatest concern. German reconnaissance aircraft could not be allowed to discover the movement. Columns advanced only at night, dispersing into forests during daylight hours. By 1400 hours on December 20th, the leading elements of the 4th Armored Division reached the area around Ardennes, just 30 kilometers from Bastogne. The speed was extraordinary, 150 kilometers in 20 hours. General Gaffey immediately established his command post and radioed Patton. "Sir, the vanguard is in position and ready." "Excellent," Patton replied. "Now let's show the Germans what American speed looks like." At the same time, General Willard Paul's 26th Infantry Division reached positions near Luxembourg City, while General Horace McBride's 80th Infantry Division assembled in the Mersch sector. In just 36 hours, Patton had shifted 133,000 men and 15,000 vehicles. It was the fastest strategic redeployment of an army during the Second World War. The German command remained unaware that an entire American army was approaching from the south. Patton had no intention of delaying. At 6 o'clock on December 21st, he issued the order. "We attack today. No preliminary bombardment. No probing. Straight ahead, tear their guts out." The Third Army prepared for the boldest counteroffensive of its history. On December 22, 1944, at 6 o'clock, the quiet of the Ardennes morning was shattered by the growl of tank engines. From the south, Patton's 4th Armored Division launched its assault against German positions. General Gaffey deployed his forces in textbook formation. Tank battalions led the advance. Motorized infantry followed in half-tracks. Self-propelled artillery covered the flanks. 160 Sherman tanks and 80 self-propelled guns surged northward. The Germans were completely taken by surprise. SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, who only days earlier had mocked the Americans as shopkeepers, now desperately attempted to shift reserves to meet the threat. "Where did they get an entire army?" he shouted into the radio. 3 days ago they were running. Now they're attacking with 3 divisions at once. The first engagement occurred near the village of Martelange. German paratroopers of the 5th Fallschirmjäger Regiment had fortified the stone buildings and prepared to repel a frontal assault. But the Americans did not attack as the Fallschirmjäger expected. Instead of charging straight in, Sherman tanks split into small groups and moved around the village, striking from 3 directions at once. Self-propelled M7 Priest howitzers were brought forward and fired directly into buildings, while infantry advanced behind dense smoke screens. Within 2 hours, Martelange was back in American hands. German losses were heavy: 340 killed or wounded, 180 taken prisoner. American casualties were far lower: 23 dead and 67 wounded. The numerical contrast was striking, but the psychological impact was even greater. German soldiers who only a day earlier had felt unstoppable now realized they were under attack. Swiftly, aggressively, and with a decisiveness that left little room for resistance. SS Unterführer Heinrich Schultz of the 12th SS Panzer Division recorded his impressions in his diary. "The Americans attack like madmen. Their tanks are everywhere, front, flanks, even behind us. It feels as if they have endless reserves. We are fighting with what remains after 5 days of continuous assault." By midday, the 4th Armored Division had advanced 8 kilometers and reached the outer approaches to Bastogne. Here, resistance stiffened dramatically. German command rushed in the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and the 5th Parachute Division. The most intense fighting of the counteroffensive now began. German Panthers and Tigers engaged American Shermans in open ground. On paper, the German tanks were superior in armor and firepower. In practice, the Americans held the advantage, numerical strength and, above all, logistics. When a German tank was knocked out, its crew often had nowhere to go. When an American Sherman was lost, a replacement frequently appeared within hours. Fuel and ammunition supplies seemed limitless. Captain James Leon, a tank company commander, later recalled, "We lost 12 tanks in one day. By evening, 15 replacements arrived. The Germans lost 8 and got none. The math of war was working for us." By the evening of December 22nd, the German encirclement Bastogne had been pierced from the south. The 4th Armored Division opened a narrow corridor to the besieged town. The 101st Airborne Division was no longer isolated. On December 23rd, the weather changed, and with it, the balance of power. The fog lifted, skies cleared, and American air power finally entered the battle. At 8:30, the first P-47 Thunderbolts roared overhead. Each fighter bomber carried 10 HVR rockets and 500-pound bombs. Against the white fields, German armor columns were clearly visible. Major Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group led the opening strike. "What we saw below was perfect," he later recalled. German tanks and trucks stretched along the roads for kilometers. It was like a shooting gallery. On that first day alone, German forces lost 89 tanks and assault guns, along with more than 200 vehicles and tractors. It was a blow from which the Panzer divisions would never recover. On the ground, however, the fighting intensified rather than eased. Encouraged by the breakthrough at Bastogne, Patton ordered the offensive widened. The 26th Infantry Division advanced toward Wiltz, while the 80th Infantry Division pushed in the direction of Edelbruck. The fiercest struggles centered on the small town of Dykirch. Though modest in size, Dykirch held enormous strategic value. Control of the town meant control of the main communication lines of the German southern flank. Recognizing this, German command committed the 352nd Infantry Division and remnants of the 276th Infantry Division. Defense was entrusted to Colonel Erich Schmidt, a seasoned veteran of the Eastern Front. "This town is the key to our southern flank," Schmidt told his troops. "If the Americans take it, the entire 7th Army risks encirclement." The attack was led by Colonel Harry Flanagan of the 80th Infantry Division. His plan was straightforward but effective. Diversionary assaults from the west and east, while the main blow fell from the north, where German defenses were weakest. The battle began at 5 o'clock on December 24th. American 105mm howitzers shelled German positions for an hour, after which 3 infantry battalions advanced with armored support. German resistance was fierce. Every building became a strong point, every street a defensive line. The Americans fought their way forward house by house, room by room. Sergeant Frank Peterson of the 317th Infantry Regiment later recalled, "It was hell. Germans waited in cellars with machine guns and Panzerfausts. Any doorway could be your last. But we kept moving because we knew Patton was behind us." By nightfall, American forces controlled half the town. The Germans withdrew toward the center and entrenched themselves inside a 14th century stone church, continuing to fire from its thick walls. Flanagan requested heavy artillery support. A battery of 155mm howitzers was brought up. 2 direct hits reduced the ancient church to rubble. Organized resistance collapsed. On Christmas Day, December 25th, Dykirch was fully liberated. The southern flank of the German Bulge began to disintegrate. December 25th, 1944, entered history as the Christmas miracle of Patton's Third Army, a day when much of Christian Europe marked the birth of Christ, and American soldiers received a different kind of gift, the chance to win. At 6 o'clock that morning, Patton personally arrived at the forward command post of the 4th Armored Division near Bastogne. He wanted to evaluate the situation firsthand and prepare the next phase of the offensive. "Gentlemen," he told his commanders, "the Germans have given us the finest Christmas present possible. They came out of their defenses and let us destroy them in the open. Now it's our turn to hand out gifts." The situation now clearly favored the Americans. In just 4 days of counteroffensive operations, the Third Army had advanced 20 kilometers, relieved Bastogne, and captured key towns. Most importantly, German initiative had been lost permanently. SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich, who a week earlier had spoken confidently of a second Dunkirk, now desperately searched for ways to save his forces from annihilation. His 6th SS Panzer Army had lost half its tanks and nearly 1/3 of its manpower. "The Americans no longer fight as they once did," he reported to Hitler. "They have become faster, bolder, more ruthless. Patton has outmaneuvered us completely." Indeed, Patton's methods marked a sharp departure from traditional American doctrine. Where others favored slow buildup and cautious advances, he chose speed, pressure, and relentless aggression. Patton's tanks struck where the Germans least expected, and his infantry advanced relentlessly without pausing to consolidate lines. "Speed is everything," Patton reminded his commanders. "While they hesitate, we move. While they regroup, we attack. They're playing at war. We're fighting it and winning." On December 26, the Third Army entered a new phase of the offensive. The mission now extended beyond relieving Bastogne. The goal was to encircle and destroy the southern portion of the German Bulge. The 4th Armored Division drove northeast to cut the Bastogne-Fales road. The 26th Infantry Division advanced toward Wiltz, while the 80th Infantry cleared remaining resistance in Luxembourg. Fierce combat erupted over the village of Sabret, transformed into a stronghold by the Germans. The 15th Panzer Grenadier Division had converted every farmhouse into a bunker, every barn into a firing position. Yet the Americans found an unconventional solution. Colonel Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, ordered his Shermans to attack at night with headlights blazing. The Germans expect daylight attacks, Abrams explained. A night assault with lights will stun them. The gamble paid off. German anti-tank gunners were blinded, infantry panicked, and positions were abandoned. Within 3 hours, Sabret was captured. By the end of December, the German Bulge had become a trap, compressed from 3 sides by American and British forces. Retreat routes were blocked by artillery and air strikes. On December 27th, German headquarters descended into near panic. What seemed a triumphant advance a week earlier had become a catastrophe. Field Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group E, convened an emergency meeting at his Zweibrücken headquarters. Reports from his division commanders painted a bleak picture. Colonel Otto Scorzani, 150th Panzer Brigade, 60% of my equipment is gone. The Americans moved too fast for us to maneuver. Major General Siegfried Roche, 5th Parachute Division. My units are scattered. Regiments have lost contact. Artillery fire is constant. Lieutenant General Fritz Berlin, Panzerlehr Division. 18 tanks remain out of 80. Fuel for 1 day. Ammunition for half a day. Model listened in silence. The tactician who had held the Red Army at bay for 2 years now faced an unstoppable American onslaught. The problem isn't that the Americans got better, he told his chief of staff. The problem is that we got worse. Our troops are exhausted, our equipment worn, and we have no reserves. Indeed, the divisions in the offensive were shadows of the Wehrmacht's former glory. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend was manned by boys of 16 and 17. The 276th Infantry Division consisted of reservists aged 40 to 50. Even the elite 1st SS Panzer Division suffered from a shortage of experienced officers. Meanwhile, Patton prepared the final blow. On December 28, he summoned his key commanders and unveiled Operation Thunderbolt. Gentlemen, he said, the Germans are stuck in the Ardennes like flies in a web. Time to close the trap for good. The plan was audacious. The Third Army would pivot northwest and link with General Hodge's First Army advancing from the north, forming a pocket to trap 3 German armies. To succeed, they had to cover another 40 kilometers through harsh terrain against desperate German resistance in temperatures plunging to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Sir, asked Major General Eddy, commander of the Tizian Corps, what if the Germans retreat? They won't, Patton smiled. Hitler won't allow it. He'll order them to stand fast, and that will be his last mistake. On December 29th, Operation Thunderbolt began. 3 corps units of the Third Army advanced northwest. The 4th Armored toward Bastogne, the 6th Armored toward Warden, and the 11th Armored toward Houffalize. German resistance was fierce but fragmented. Dispersed divisions could not support each other. The Americans exploited mobility, striking where the enemy was weakest. By the day's end, the Bulge had contracted another 15 kilometers. German losses exceeded 8,000 men and 150 tanks. American losses were 890 soldiers and 23 tanks. On January 1st, 1945, Patton received an intelligence report that piqued his interest. The Germans had deployed a battalion of heavy tanks. 14 King Tigers, the most formidable armored vehicles in the world. These 70-ton monsters, armed with 88mm guns, were nearly invulnerable to standard American Shermans. A single King Tiger could annihilate an entire Sherman company from a distance. Interesting, Patton said to his intelligence chief, they want to test their toys against us. Let's see how that works out. On January 2nd, the King Tigers of the 500th SS Heavy Tank Battalion engaged the 8th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division, 17 Shermans under Lieutenant Colonel Jack Richardson. On paper, it seemed David versus Goliath. Shermans weighed 32 tons and mounted 76mm guns, effective against a King Tiger only at less than 500 meters. The King Tiger could destroy a Sherman at 2,000 meters. But Richardson, a veteran of the African campaign. New tank battles were won by tactics, not tonnage. "Listen carefully," he told his crews over the radio. "We won't fight them head-on. We'll hunt like wolves, fast, coordinated, and unexpected." He divided his battalion into 4 groups of 4 tanks each. One group drew German fire with a frontal demonstration, while the second and third maneuvered to flank, and the fourth struck from the rear. At 14:30, the battle began. The German Tigers, positioned on a hill, methodically destroyed American Shermans. 3 were lost in 5 minutes, but then Richardson's plan began to take effect. While the Germans focused on the frontal group, the American flanking units struck at weaker side armor. The sides of the King Tigers were far less reinforced than their thick frontal plates. The result stunned both sides. In just 40 minutes, 8 King Tigers were destroyed while 6 Shermans were lost. The casualty ratio was staggering. 1 King Tiger equaled 5 Shermans, but the psychological impact was even greater. Germany's most formidable weapon was not invincible. Technical superiority counted for nothing if the enemy outmaneuvered you. SS Obersturmführer Johann Puffer, commander of the 500th SS Heavy Tank Battalion, radioed in disbelief. "The Americans fight completely differently now. Faster, smarter, bolder. Our Tigers have been defeated not by machines but by tactics." On January 3rd, Patton personally inspected the battlefield. Walking among the smoking hulks of King Tigers, he famously remarked, "It doesn't matter how big or powerful your tank is. What matters is who sits inside." By January 8th, Hitler faced the harshest decision of his military career. He authorized a retreat from the Ardennes. 22 days of bloody fighting had proven that Germany's final gamble had failed. But the retreat itself was no less brutal. Under constant American artillery and air attack, moving along icy roads, abandoning equipment, and severely wounded soldiers, 3 German armies staggered back toward the Siegfried Line. Patton had no intention of allowing a peaceful withdrawal. "They came as uninvited guests," he said. "Now they will pay for it." From January 9th to 10th, the Third Army struck at retreating German columns. American aircraft operated day and night, turning the German march into a nightmare. Major Guard Angle of the 12th SS Panzer Division wrote in his diary, "This isn't a retreat. It's a rout. Wrecked vehicles everywhere. Bodies everywhere. American planes hunt us like rabbits. Discipline is collapsing." On January 16th, the spearheads of the U.S. 3rd and 1st Armies met near Houffalize. The Bulge was eliminated. The Battle of the Ardennes ended in complete Allied victory. The losses were catastrophic for Germany. 67,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, 700 tanks and assault guns, 1,600 aircraft, the Reich's last strategic reserves. American losses were far lower, 19,000 men and 733 tanks. And unlike the Germans, the U.S. could replace those losses in weeks. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, reviewing the outcome, noted grimly, "After the Ardennes, we have no resources left for strategic operations. From now on, we can only retreat and await the end." The worst blow, however, was moral. Germany's final attempt to alter the course of the war had collapsed. Wehrmacht soldiers who in December had still clung to hope now realized the war was lost. Patton, by contrast, was at the height of his fame. In just 26 days of fighting, the Third Army had marched 150 kilometers, destroyed 4 German divisions, and liberated dozens of towns. On January 16th, Eisenhower personally visited the Third Army headquarters to congratulate Patton. "George," he said, "what you accomplished in the Ardennes will go down in history as one of the greatest feats of the U.S. Armed Forces." When the battle ended, analysts examined the reasons behind Germany's catastrophic failure. Why had armies that once triumphed on every front been powerless against the Americans? The chief error was underestimating the enemy. The Wehrmacht, accustomed to victories from 1939 to 1942, failed to recognize that the U.S. Army of 1944 was fundamentally different from the inexperienced forces of 1942 to 43. Major General Kenneth Strong, Eisenhower's chief intelligence officer, conducted a detailed analysis of German planning for Operation Wacht am Rhein. His conclusions were striking. The Germans had planned the offensive using the logic of 1940, expecting the Americans to panic and retreat like the French 4 years earlier. But the 1944 U.S. Army was entirely different. In 2.5 years of war, American officers had gained experience in Africa, Italy, and Normandy, and soldiers had learned to fight as effectively as the Germans. American technology and logistics had reached unprecedented levels. The Germans also misjudged the nature of American troops. Unlike Europeans, long accustomed to rigid hierarchy, Americans relied on initiative and independence. When a commander fell, a sergeant took over. When the sergeant fell, a private stepped up. This trait proved decisive in the chaos of the Ardennes. Cut off from command, German soldiers often lost the will to fight. Americans in the same situation only fought harder. American industrial power also played a decisive role. By 1944, lost tanks could be replaced within hours, downed aircraft within a day, and fallen pilots within a week. The Germans, by contrast, were stretched to the limit. Each Tiger tank loss was irreplaceable. Every Me-262 destroyed a catastrophe. Experienced crews were worth their weight in gold. But Hitler's greatest mistake was strategic delusion. He had envisioned the Ardennes offensive as a turning point that would force the Western Allies into a separate peace. By late 1944, such a notion was pure fantasy. The Allies were already planning post-war settlements. No tactical setback could compel them to compromise with the Nazi regime. General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, summarized it succinctly. Hitler lived in a world of illusions. He thought we were like the French in 1940. But we didn't come for glory or territory. We came to destroy Nazism forever. The Germans also miscalculated the psychological dimension. The Malmedy massacre, where SS troops executed American prisoners, only strengthened Allied resolve. Instead of inducing fear, it fueled determination to fight to the end. Sergeant Kurt von Alt of the 285th Infantry Regiment recorded in his diary, "When news of Malmedy reached us, the mood in the companies changed overnight. Before, we saw the Germans as ordinary soldiers following orders. Now we saw them as murderers, people who had to be destroyed." Operation Wacht am Rhein exposed another fatal flaw in German strategy: total dependence on Hitler himself. The Führer personally planned the operation, personally appointed commanders, and personally forbade retreat. Even when situations turned hopeless, a system built around the cult of one man proved dangerously fragile. When Hitler's decisions were wrong, there was no mechanism to correct them. No one dared oppose the so-called greatest commander of all time. The American command system, by contrast, relied on collegiality and professionalism. Eisenhower consulted his subordinates. Patton listened to his staff. Division commanders had freedom of initiative. The result was inevitable. A flexible, adaptive American system defeated a rigid German hierarchy. To appreciate the scale of the American victory in the Ardennes, one must examine what Patton achieved with his Third Army. Military historians regard the operation as one of the greatest examples of operational art in the 20th century. First, Patton demonstrated unmatched speed of reaction. From Eisenhower's phone call to the launch of the counterattack, only 72 hours passed. In that time, the Third Army pivoted its entire front by 90 degrees and marched 150 kilometers. By comparison, the Germans required at least a week to redeploy a single army, and the Soviets about 10 days. Patton did it in 3. The secret lay in extraordinary logistics. Colonel Walter Mueller, chief of movement for the Third Army, designed a system that allowed massive troop movements with minimal delays. Every division had a detailed route, timed to the minute. Each column knew exactly when and where to refuel. Commanders had clear contingency instructions. Logistics is the art of the possible, Mueller said, and we made the impossible possible. Second, Patton showed mastery in the tactical employment of combined arms. His armor divisions acted not as blunt iron fists, but as surgical scalpels, striking German defenses at their weakest points. Frontal assaults were avoided in favor of flanking maneuvers. Instead of long artillery barges, he relied on sudden strikes with air support. Cautious advances were replaced by rapid breakthroughs with immediate exploitation. Patton fought outside the rules, recalled Lieutenant General Fritz Rhein, commander of Panzer Division. When we expected a frontal strike, he hit from the flank. When we prepared for a flank attack, he struck from the rear. Third, Patton wielded psychological pressure with precision. His Third Army didn't just advance. It created an atmosphere of inevitable German defeat. Fast breakthroughs, sweeping flanks, sudden rear attacks, these measures eroded German confidence. Many units surrendered without firing a shot. Field Marshal model later reflected. Patton didn't just fight our soldiers, he fought our spirit. And in that fight, we lost. Fourth, Patton coordinated multiple armies with rare skill. The Ardennes counterattack required seamless cooperation between his Third Army, Hodge's First Army, and Simpson's Ninth Army. Patton didn't simply execute orders. He actively shaped neighboring forces' actions. His initiative created an avalanche effect. Patton wasn't just an army commander, Eisenhower later noted. He was a catalyst that accelerated everything around him. Finally, Patton showed instinctive grasp of initiative under the harshest conditions. While most American commanders focused on defense, Patton immediately planned a counterattack. He didn't react to the enemy. He forced the enemy to react to him. The Battle of the Ardennes ended nearly 80 years ago, yet its lessons remain relevant. The operation serves as both a textbook on the dangers of flawed strategic planning and a model for crisis response. Lesson 1. Underestimating the enemy leads to disaster. German planners relied on 1940 logic, ignoring how much the U.S. Army had evolved in 2 years. Modern militaries face the same challenge. Failure to adapt is fatal. Lesson 2. Speed of reaction often outweighs perfect planning. Patton lacked time for meticulous preparation, but decisiveness and improvisation proved decisive. In modern, fast-moving conflicts, commanders who delay for bureaucracy will be outpaced by those who act boldly. Lesson 3. Psychological factors can be as decisive as material strength. The Germans possessed a force of success in the Ardennes, but early setbacks shattered their morale. Americans, even in adversity, maintained confidence, seasoned initiative. Lesson 4. A flexible command system is crucial. Germany's rigid hierarchy, centered on Hitler, failed in dynamic situations. The U.S. system, based on delegated authority and initiative, allowed rapid adaptation. Lesson 5. Logistics is critical. Germany's offensive collapsed from fuel and ammunition shortages. The Americans, by contrast, had near limitless supplies. In modern warfare, the ability to sustain operations remains decisive. Lesson 6. Technological superiority matters, but only when combined with strategy and tactics. By 1944, the advantage of the U.S. forces lay not only in the quality of their weapons, but also in mass production and effective application. Lesson 7. The strategic maturity of leadership is decisive. The Americans saw war as more than a series of battles. It was about destroying Nazi ideology. This vision allowed them to maintain coalition unity even in crises and fight relentlessly to victory. The Ardennes offensive was Germany's last great attempt to change the course of the war. Its failure sealed the fate of the Third Reich, leaving the road to Berlin open. When the final fighting in the Ardennes concluded in January 1945, it was clear that the world had changed forever. The operation intended to deliver Germany a second Dunkirk had instead become its ultimate disaster. Ironically, German contempt for the Americans became the catalyst of their own defeat. Underestimation, overconfidence, and dismissal of U.S. capabilities led to strategic blindness. On December 16, 1944, SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich had every reason for optimism. His divisions had broken through American defenses. Thousands of U.S. soldiers surrendered, and the road to Antwerp seemed open. By December 22nd, however, Dietrich was frantically trying to salvage what remained of his army. American troops, merchants by background, had proved such formidable warriors that even elite SS units could not withstand them. What had happened in those 6 days? How did an army that had been retreating in panic seize the initiative and deliver a devastating counterblow? The answer is simple. The Germans were fighting against outdated perceptions, not reality. Their image of the U.S. Army was 2 years behind. In that time, Americans had transformed from raw novices to professional soldiers. More importantly, they demonstrated a principle of modern warfare. Victory goes not to those with proud traditions, but to those who adapt fastest to changing conditions. The German army, burdened by its immense historical experience, proved too conservative. The American army, unshackled by dogma, developed innovative approaches to combat. Patton became the symbol of this new American philosophy of war. His Third Army fought not by academic doctrine, but by effectiveness. Goals mattered more than tradition. "I'm not fighting German generals," Patton said. "I'm fighting German soldiers, and my soldiers are better than theirs." This philosophy proved decisive. In 3 weeks of fighting in the Ardennes, the Americans not only repelled the German offensive, but also showcased a new model of warfare that would influence future conflicts. Speed, flexibility, technological superiority, mastery of logistics, and psychological impact on the enemy. All these elements were combined in a single, effective system. The Germans, by contrast, demonstrated the danger of clinging to past glories. Blitzkrieg, so effective from 1939 to 1941, failed against an enemy that had learned to counter it. Operation Wacht am Rhein became the swan song of the old European school of war. After the Ardennes, it was clear that the future belonged to those willing to change quickly and experiment boldly. The American victory carried immense symbolic weight. It proved to the world that the United States was not only an industrial giant, but also a formidable military power. The European balance of power had shifted forever. The era when Europe's armies decided the fate of the continent had ended. The American era had begun, and it continues today. The Battle of the Ardennes concluded nearly 8 decades ago, yet its echo still resounds. It was more than a military victory. It marked an epical shift, the transition from the old world to the new. On the morning of December 16, 1944, when German guns thundered through the Ardennes forests, few could foresee that this operation would represent Europe's last attempt to retain dominance. Germany, heir to centuries of military tradition, wagered everything. Opposing it stood the young American army, a nation that only 40 years earlier had fought native tribes, but now claimed global leadership. The outcome shocked everyone, even the Americans themselves. In 26 days of combat, it became evident. The future belonged not to those with the longest history, but to those who adapted fastest. Patton and his soldiers revealed a new understanding of war. It was not an art but technology, not a ritual but a process, not a display of national spirit, but a means to achieve concrete objectives. This pragmatic approach outperformed romantic visions of glory. The Americans fought not for prestige, but to finish the war efficiently and return home. Paradoxically, this practical motivation made them unstoppable. While Germans dreamed of grand victories, Americans dismantled the German war machine methodically, piece by piece. German jokes about American merchants proved prophetic in an unexpected way. The Americans approached war like merchants, with calculation, planning, attention to detail, and drive for maximum efficiency. The result was decisive. The merchants crushed the warriors. Technology overcame tradition. The future outplayed the past. The Battle of the Ardennes became a defining moment for Western civilization. Leadership had passed from the old world to the new, from Europe to America, from aristocracy to democracy. This transition was inevitable, but in the Ardennes, it reached dramatic completion. When the last German tanks withdrew toward the Siegfried Line, an entire era receded with them. A new era had begun, the American era, when world affairs would increasingly be shaped by a nation whose soldiers had once seemed untested amateurs to Europeans. The irony is that the Germans hastened this process themselves. Their operation, intended to restore German dominance in Europe, instead handed that dominance to America forever. Reflecting on the dramatic winter of 1944-45, it is clear that the Ardennes campaign shaped not only the outcome of World War II, but also the contours of the following century. Patton and his men did more than defeat the German army. They introduced a new way of thinking, a new military culture, and a new method for solving global challenges. That legacy endures today. Modern conflicts still echo the principles first applied by Americans in the Ardennes: speed, technological edge, logistical precision, and psychological impact. The Battle of the Ardennes changed the face of war forever, and that remains its enduring lesson. Was this lesson good for humanity? History has yet to decide, but one fact is undeniable. In December 1944, in the Ardennes forest, a new world was born, a world we still inhabit today.